under the dim yellow glow of a military outpost lantern in Guangxi, where echoes of gunfire still lingered from the distant border. A young officer stood gazing at a map of China, as if trying to grasp the fate of the entire nation through its blurred boundaries. His name was Bai Chongxi, a man who would later enter history as a brilliant general, bearing both the appearance of a Confucian scholar and the resilience of a hardened warrior amid chaos and war. Above all, he was a man forever torn between loyalty to his country, his religion, and his own conscience.
The article below has been compiled from many sources. If there are any mistakes, or if you know any interesting information, feel free to leave a comment so I can learn as well. Now, let's begin the article.
From a southern child to a soldier of misfortune, the youth of Bai Chongxi. Born in 1893 in Guangxi province, Bai Chongxi came into the world in a Zhuang ethnic family that was poor, yet held a quiet pride. He grew up amid deep green forests and the distant echo of village drums. His father was a modest village teacher, instructing local children in classical Chinese, while his mother wove cloth for hire to help support the family. They never dreamed their son would become a general or high official. They only hoped he would uphold what was right and never bow to the wicked. From an early age, Bai Chongxi was a quiet child. While his peers ran and played, he would sit silently in a corner, watching grown men practice martial arts or listening intently to stories of a world in turmoil. He was captivated by tales of Yue Fei, Zhang Fei, and even defeated warriors like Xiang Yu, men who may not have triumphed, but who never betrayed themselves. At the age of 8, he lost his father. The family plunged into hardship, and his mother brought him to town, hoping that distant relatives might help him continue his studies. They had no money and no connections, but Bai Chongxi excelled in his studies, especially in mathematics and classical military strategy. One teacher once said, "This boy will command an army, not because he seeks bloodshed, but because he understands how to avoid it." At 16, he enrolled in the Guangxi Military Academy, a decision that brought his mother to tears night after night. But it was there, amid harsh drills and rigid discipline, that Bai Chongxi began to take the shape of the man history would later remember. An officer who never sought the spotlight, yet possessed quiet, commanding strength. One commanding officer once remarked, "He doesn't speak much, but when the battle begins, the entire platoon watches his eyes." Not long after, China descended into chaos, a tangled era of revolution, warlords, banditry, and endless battles. But throughout it all, Bai Chongxi remained true to a part of himself that never changed, resolute, silent, and loyal, not to any single faction, but to the ideal of a soldier who knows whom he serves. And so it was that the barefoot boy who had once walked through the rural villages of Guangxi stepped onto the battlefield, carrying in his heart the dreams of a nation that had never truly known peace. The guardian of the divide, Bai Chongxi in the Northern Expedition and the struggle for power. When the cries of Northern Expedition echoed across southern China, Bai Chongxi, then still a young general, did not emerge with grand banners or stirring proclamations. He followed Li Zongren like a silent shadow, but a shadow that carried weight. Within the Guangxi clique, he was a unique spear point, not loud, not reckless, but sharp and precise like a well-hidden blade. The Northern Expedition was not merely a campaign against the Beiyang warlords. It was a declaration of ambition to unify China by force. In this campaign, Bai Chongxi was entrusted with leading several key battles across Hunan, Hebei, and Jiangsu. The places he passed through rarely bore scars, for he fought swiftly, decisively, with minimal loss and almost no looting. Officers who served under him once said, "General Bai didn't need to shout. One look from him, and the men already knew what to do." Victory did not intoxicate him. While many commanders began maneuvering for political gain, strengthening their positions within the Kuomintang, Bai kept his habits, praying at dawn, sleeping in a small tent beside his soldiers, and quietly recording his thoughts in a black leather notebook each night. To him, victory was not power, it was responsibility. Yet within the campaign's success lay a growing fracture in the Kuomintang ranks. Li Zongren, his mentor and patron, began to clash bitterly with Kai-shek, who was tightening his grip on central authority. In that struggle, Bai Chongxi found himself in the middle, loyal to Li Zongren, yet bound to execute orders from the Nanjing central government. No one truly knew what he thought. He did not make public statements, attend political meetings, or issue open letters like some generals did. But every move he made, every deployment he commanded, was calculated, as though he were delicately maintaining a fragile rope stretched between two chasms. Within the party, many began calling him the guardian of the boundary, because he never stepped too far to either side. And it was this very caution that ensured his survival. When political purges swept through the Kuomintang, many generals were ousted or forced into exile. But Bai Chongxi remained, still commanding, still praying in silence, still the quiet Muslim general in an atmosphere thick with suspicion and ambition. He was not one to change the course of history, but he was the one who kept it from bursting at the seams. In an era when men were so easily consumed by glory or hatred, Bai Chongxi held fast to the simplest virtue of a soldier: to fight when ordered, never for fame. And when new storms began to rise, when the war with Japan loomed, and the shadows of civil conflict crept closer, he still stood there, on the border between loyalty and survival, between belief and duty, a soldier who never chose the times, but never turned away from them. Silent, amid the storm, Bai Chongxi in the war of resistance against Japan. When Japanese artillery thundered across the northeast, then rolled into north and central China, Bai Chongxi, who had once campaigned throughout China during the Northern Expedition, once again donned his armor and marched to war. But this time, the enemy was not fellow warlords in familiar uniforms, but a foreign empire, cold, brutal, and arrogantly distant. In 1937, as full-scale war erupted between China and Japan, Bai Chongxi was appointed commander-in-chief of the Guangxi Army, one of the key defense forces in the southern region. In the rear, he was responsible for building defensive lines across Guangxi and Guizhou, regions considered strategic gateways should Japan advance southwest. At the front, he led major battles in Hunan, particularly in the Battle of Changsha. The First Battle of Changsha in 1939 was one of the rare Chinese victories in the early phase of the resistance. In that battle, Bai Chongxi's troops, coordinating with other units, managed to drive the Japanese out of the city, a resounding triumph in an otherwise bleak campaign. After the battle, he made no speeches, did not appear before reporters. People only saw him sitting beside the command tent, poring over maps, casualty reports, and silently crossing out the names of fallen soldiers. Unlike many generals of the time, who viewed war as a chance to cement their power, Bai Chongxi saw the resistance as a painful duty. He once told his subordinates, "We don't fight to win. We fight to leave behind something for our children." Even so, his caution and organizational ability made him indispensable to the nationalist government. Though he was never granted the highest rank, he was consistently entrusted with critical roles, protecting supply routes from Vietnam to Kunming, securing the rear in Guangxi, and maintaining stability among the diverse ethnic populations in the borderlands. And yet, beneath the light of military success, Bai Chongxi remained a silent figure. He avoided celebratory banquets, did not join factions within the Kuomintang, refrained from quarrels with Chiang Kai-shek's loyalists, and never praised his own Guangxi clique. He only appeared on the battlefield, then vanished into the shadows once the fighting ended. That was his style, to leave no trace, yet never be forgotten. After 1941, when the US and China became allies, Chinese forces began receiving large-scale aid. Bai Chongxi was tasked with inspecting and retraining many units, bringing his trademark strict discipline to reform an army worn down by prolonged war. During these months, he was less seen at the front lines, and more often in remote barracks where soldiers learned to operate American weapons and learned how to become a real army. Under his quiet but stern guidance, a new generation of young officers began to mature, many of whom would later play major roles in the coming Civil War. And therein lay the greatest tragedy of Bai Chongxi's life. Just as the foreign enemy retreated, blood was about to be spilled once more, this time among those who once called each other comrades. Once again, he would stand at the divide. But this time, behind him no longer lay a stable rear, but a country fractured, torn at its very core. And though he said nothing, everyone knew. The old general was weary, but he had never stopped guarding what he believed to be essential: discipline, loyalty, and a quiet faith that China would one day rise again. Between two lines, a veteran general in a new war. When Japan surrendered in 1945, many heaved a sigh of relief, but Bai Chongxi did not. He knew that after 8 long years of resistance against foreign invasion, what awaited China was not peace, but another war. One even more painful, more protracted, and filled with bitter contradictions between former comrades in arms. The Kuomintang, KMT, and the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, once allies in the fight against Japan, now entered a period of ruthless confrontation. The first clashes broke out as early as 1946, and from there, the Nationalist-Communist Civil War quickly escalated. In this volatile atmosphere, Bai Chongxi, by then one of the most senior generals left in the Kuomintang, was once again called to the front. He was appointed Supreme Commander of Nationalist Forces in central and southern China, overseeing the vast battlefield of South China. But unlike during the war against Japan, this time he faced not just a single enemy, but also internal shadows: corruption, disobedience, overlapping orders from Nanjing, and growing distrust among KMT generals. Bai Chongxi had never been one to make noise in politics, but now he was forced to engage. He clashed fiercely with many of Chiang Kai-shek's close military aides and repeatedly sent telegrams protesting the central government's handling of troop deployments. Even so, he did not resign. He did not retreat to his hometown of Guilin, nor did he request retirement. As he had always done, he chose to stand in the eye of the storm, quietly, patiently, and with great inner conflict. The Civil War grew increasingly brutal. Major campaigns in North and Northeast China failed, turning South China into the final stronghold. In 1949, as communist forces approached Guangxi, Bai Chongxi led the last defense at Luzhou. Even in desperation, he maintained military order and organized a disciplined retreat, a stark contrast to the chaos and collapse elsewhere. When Chiang Kai-shek ordered a full evacuation to Taiwan, Bai Chongxi did not leave immediately. He lingered behind, trying to arrange for his family and for the soldiers still stranded, and only left when no other choice remained. That was the last time he saw the mainland, the land that had witnessed his youth, his battles, and the silent aspirations of a soldier who never chose the times he lived in. The final years of Bai Chongxi. After arriving in Taiwan, Bai Chongxi brought with him no riches or power, only an old suitcase, a few military uniforms, and a worn leather notebook he had used throughout the war against Japan. Those who met him in the 1950s noted a strange calmness in him, as if he had left all battles and struggles behind, resigned to the past. Unlike many other Kuomintang generals who rushed to enter politics, accept positions in the exile government, or write memoirs to defend their reputations, Bai Chongxi chose a reclusive life. He never appeared in the press or at public gatherings. He declined all offers to rebuild military units or serve as a military advisor, though such invitations were frequent. To him, the war was over, not just the Civil War, but also the war within the soul of an old soldier. He lived in a modest wooden house on the outskirts of Taipei. Every morning he rose before dawn, maintaining the habits he had always kept. Exercising, cleaning his gun, which now served only as a memento, and reading, mostly classic military treatises, books on the West, and old letters from comrades long gone. No one knew what he wrote in his leather notebook, but the housekeeper said he often sat for a long time in silence, scribbled a few lines, and then quietly closed it. Perhaps what haunted him most was not the defeat in the Civil War, but the fate of the soldiers who had once followed him. Many failed to escape the mainland. Many were sent to labor camps, and some chose to end their lives rather than surrender. In the twilight hours, he would often stand silently, gazing toward the mainland, where Guilin, his hometown, lay along with the dreams that never had the chance to bloom. In a letter to an old friend in Hong Kong, he once wrote, "I do not regret losing the war. What I regret is not being able to bring them all back. A commander may fall on the battlefield, but he must never let his soldiers be forgotten." In 1966, Bai Chongxi passed away in his sleep, leaving no will behind. His funeral was modest, attended only by a few old soldiers and close family members. There were no long eulogies, no honor guards. But for those who had once stood by his side, that day marked the end of a quiet yet indispensable chapter in the history of modern China. Today, Bai Chongxi's name is rarely mentioned in textbooks. There are no monuments in his honor, no television dramas made about him. Yet in the hearts of those who cherish historical truth, he remains a symbol of a military integrity long faded, loyalty without declaration, righteousness without embellishment, and a willingness to silently bear the storm so that others might live in peace. Bai Chongxi did not choose the life of a general, but once he stood in the ranks, he never turned away. And perhaps it is precisely that quietness, amid a century filled with gunfire and betrayal, that stands as his most enduring legacy.
Thank you all for following and listening. If you enjoyed and found it interesting, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay tuned for our upcoming videos.